sent me I think it was University of Exeter,
Yes.
about their magical program, an esoterica program or whatever it was. And it just read like it was very laden with ideology. And I imagine that anyone who wanted to join that program would need to play along
And that
and
is the
couch
thing.
their studies in those terms and stuff. Like it's all this like post-colonialist theory and like, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine, but that's like a 21st century construct. But if you're really trying to study like the history of this stuff, you got to get out of that, I think. I mean,
It is the game. It's marketing. Come on, it's marketing. You take modern constructs and modern causes and you try and essentially project them onto historical events and relevance. And what I find unfortunate is that this is the thing. We all know that academia is laden with immense agendas.
right.
And from my angle of things, the difficulty I'm finding is that when I look at these programs, even when you look at, I was looking at parapsychology, and parapsychology has moved a direction to be purely based on consciousness studies. So it's almost coterminous with psychology and psychiatry, except less reputable. I mean, I don't know how they think this is going to turn out well for themselves at this point. So it's one of those things where it's like, but what about the cool stuff? What happened to looking at going out ghost hunting and things like that?
Ghost hunting, yeah.
What happened to the fun stuff, the cool things, the things that really pull up that actually are really interesting? The minute
What are you saying? Like modern modern professors aren't into fun?
Yes, I'm actually saying that.
I would have to agree with you.
The things that they write are not fun to read. It's the same thing vomited over and over and over again with maybe a few nuggets worth picking up out of the vomit, right?
Right.
The issue that I have is that when you find those few brilliant, passionate people within a study, they're usually ground down by the agendas.
Mm-hmm.
That even the people that are putting on the program may not feel that strongly about.
Right. Actually, I have what you sent me just so we can the program description from Exeter. It said, by housing this program within the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies, we place the Arabo-Islamic cultural heritage back where it belongs at the center of these studies and in the history of the West. Decolonization, the exploration of alternative epistemologies, feminism, and anti-racism are at the core of this program. And, for what it is, if someone wants to study that, good on them. But
absolutely,
I feel like if you come at this program with something that doesn't check all those boxes, they're probably not going to take you on as a student. And I feel like, I mean, everyone does this now. My wife is going through like what's called an EER, where diplomats have to go and say, look at all the stuff I've been doing as a diplomat. I'm checking all these boxes. I got the feminism stuff. I'm doing anti-racism. I'm doing feminism, and I'm doing all this stuff. And it's like, meanwhile, when people are focused on all that, the world's going to shit, and we're in like 7 wars now.
It's a fundamental disconnect. And I at a long view, when you're looking at these things, it's like, what are you talking about? People are dying. You're just talking. This is all hot air that you're putting out there.
Hot air, right?
We're anti-racist. What? And that is the issue that I see in this Cartesian world, where we take these ideas of words somehow magically translating to some action being taken. No, they're not. There's no action.
Right.
They're standing up at a podium. They say stuff, but in truth, and this is something I hold from even a Stoic perspective, the truth of what you are is what you are doing.
Right.
Action is the only way to truly judge anything.
Right.
Intent doesn't matter. Intent is the road to hell is paved in good intentions. We often say that, right?
Yeah. This reminds me of like some kind of weird cult where you mutter some shibboleth and you get admitted into the order. It's like, oh, I know the password. This is the password to get into your community. Actually, this philosopher Slavoj Žižek just published a book the other, I don't know, recently in the last few months, and it's called Christian Atheism. I'm neither Christian nor an atheist, but Slavoj Žižek basically said, if you ask like people in the West, like what's your main, like what do you value the most, and they would say something like, equality. Like elite, the social elite, the professors or whatever, they value something like equality. And then they ask the same question to people in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is in his book. I'm just kind of regurgitating what he says in his recent book. They ask the same question: what do you value the most in sub-Saharan Africa? And the answer they found is they value people with money, regardless of how they earn that money. As long as you got money, that's a value, and that's a good thing for you. If you have money, whether you're a warlord or whatever, you got money, that's good. We value that. This is Slavoj Žižek's thesis. He said basically, like, the West, they've attained such a comfort level that they have the ability to entertain these kind of abstract concepts of equality. Žižek says, this makes sense. The developed West can afford to prioritize equality at the level of ideological self-perception, while the main worry among the poor majority in sub-Saharan Africa is how to survive and leave devastating poverty behind. There is a further paradox. This struggle against inequality is self-destructive insofar as it undercuts its own foundation. In other words, we critique our own privilege by saying we value equality. But that critique is itself hegemonic. And Žižek points out that non-Westerners, people who are not in the Anglosphere in the West, this degenerate hegemon, they know that this self-humiliation ritual that the West thrusts upon itself, this idea of being pro-equality, is fake. They know it's fake because they look at the Palestinians. Is the U.S. promoting equality between the Israelis and the Palestinians? No. It becomes its own new form of kind of through the back door culture supremacy to say we value equality, because they're actually not valuing equality, because if they look at the sub-Saharan Africans who value money, they would look down on that and they would say, actually, that's loathsome.
Let's step back.
We are in the enlightened West. We have the right idea. We, the liberal elite who value equality, are supreme, are the new supremacists. So it's like a paradox. It's like a paradox of equality.
I actually want to stand back and applaud the way that, because let's be honest, the best way to make a point is by making a punchline. And really, that does read like some sort of cruel, horrible, unaware joke.
Yeah. I'm imagining the people who valorize equality as all going to Harvard. Well, look at the endowment at Harvard. It's like they have billions of dollars, but they would be the last person to say that money is the object or money is the goal, because they have it. They have it already.
Right.
So they have to look down on those who want money.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is for the rich. Let's be very, very clear. When you're in a survival state, none of the self-actualization, no.
Right, self-actualization, yeah.
That's all nonsense.
Those few higher tiers are for the rich, for sure. Yeah,
that's right. I think when we're looking at academics and the truth of it, what academics needs to more directly address is how do we survive using this information? And there are numerous lessons within writing, within literature. I mean, literature is literally the song of humanity, right? Literature is the struggle that moves from the spoken word and talking about things that mattered, moving into actually being able to record it and the interpretation of it and learning from it. This is a powerful concept that we rely on, that is the foundation of why we created the internet, to benefit humanity, to allow us to make less mistakes and make more strides forward. And yet, where are we as a result? Is we find all these people that are willing to take this information and muddy it as much as possible for their own personal gain. So really, I love the numerous ways you can view what the fellow that you brought up. I will not even try to pronounce his name.
Slavoj Žižek. Žižek. Yeah.
Despite the fact we're pretending to these lofty concepts whenever you ask us, what do you value? Really, it's the same thing. Ultimately, when you look at that, when they're talking about high lofty concepts, they're looking at what people who have attained wealth are concerned with, which is just sounding good and sounding relevant and sounding viable, because the worst thing that you can possibly do now that you have money, well, now you have to justify why you have the money. So you'd better sound good doing it, right?
Yeah. You better sound selfless and, helpful, humble. Like, and you just have to sound like you belong in the group of people that have money who all talk like that.
If you're like me, because I actually got into studies because I just like it. I like the information. I wasn't planning on doing it. I'm just curious.
Right.
When you look at these amazing minds in history, these people had nothing that we have right now. What they had was the ability to have passion and to root through whatever information they had at hand to find immense value within it due to the imaginal structures they create around it, the implications of the thing. For them, words weren't empty. Words were pregnant with potential. A few smattering of words in a manuscript could inspire immense vistas of imagination that could be enacted upon within a physical, actual physical experimentation. This is why the Renaissance magi revolted against the outlawing of experimental science. They wanted to understand the world. And I find it fascinating that when we talk about these empty words were considered divine, the logos and everything like that. The power of the word spell is about spelling, divine names. Enchantment, you speak them and everything like that.
Right.
Even grimoire comes from, glamour or grammar.
Oh, wow.
Speaking. Yeah, so it's one of those things that language is sacred. Perhaps when you look at the true worth of esoterica, it's maintaining the sacredness of words. Words are truly powerful. And that's why I was kind of I wanted to talk to you as a person that studies language and writing and the recorded word. This is a thing of immense value.
It's interesting that higher education, the higher humanities, especially English literature since the 1960s, it's kind of fallen off a little bit now, but I think the damage has already been done. And that is from post-structuralist or deconstructionist theory, postmodern deconstructionist or post-structuralist theory. Derrida has this concept je, which in a way I find refreshing because the word je in French is play. You play with words. Words are something that are endlessly play-withable. Just like music. You can always rearrange and play and make like little puns and rhymes and tell stories.
Glamour, grammar, and grimoire and things like that, right?
Right. But on the other hand, I think by putting such an emphasis on the deconstructibility of language, since the 60s, a lot of like post-structuralist theorists and the deconstructionist agenda is to basically undermine the meaning of words. I mean, that might sound a little bit far-fetched or a little bit of an overstatement, but so many people now, their first response or first reaction when seeing a beautiful piece of like Renaissance poetry, like a sonnet, would be like, how can we deconstruct this piece of writing so that what sounds at first like a love poem, we can actually see that he secretly wants to just rape the woman? Like always looking for the hidden agenda, always looking for like the way that the sonnet deconstructs itself and undermines its own premises, and I'm like, okay, I mean, but that in itself is an agenda that has knit within itself like a truth about language that you can deconstruct it in a playful way. But I think there's something insidious about it as well, because it came along with a general anti-civilizational or anti-Western civilizational agenda, so that now instead of pre 60s or pre World War II, like the idea of going to college to study like literature and the arts and letters, was to learn about the great minds of literature, the great minds of poetry and philosophy. And since then, it's like, oh, you can't do that because that's too Western centric. That's too Eurocentric. We got to undermine these things and show that we're all just equal. You can't have the great minds of the past be all dead white men or something. They have to be undermined and brought down a peg. And you're talking about value. I don't see the value in that other than being attached to an institutional political value that is dictated from on
So
high
let's
from
take a
like
step back and let's make it more cultural rather than modernly political, which I think we can agree is a bit of a trite way of looking at things, right? It is
yeah.
not. So this is the thing that we have to look at is that I don't know if I ever talked about Plato's Republic and how everyone always shoots it down as enlightened despotism, and that's the thing you always hear about it. It's despotism still. It's still so people mistake, in my opinion, from just my view, and this is just my way of looking at it. People mistake the aim. What he was looking at was not creating a just system. He was looking to create a means of perpetually maintaining a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're to create, because basically what you look at when you look at these, because writing about perfect societies as an example to all of humanity, and also in the same example showing how easily even the most perfect society can fall. We've talked about that before: Atlantis, Atocentine, Heliopolis, and
Yeah.
various other philosophical perfect societies. The goal in telling this is that even if we reach the loftiest of heights, you can still topple in an instant. But when you look at the issues right now and what we're facing, I find that people have become overly concerned with clear answers. You want a clear enemy. You want a clear problem. You want a clear solution.
Mm.
And yet, those of us who live, especially those of us who are living day to day, there are no clear answers. There are
Right.
no there are no clear questions. There are no clear resolutions to anything. And people get upset. Well, like we can't make any end meet, not even ethical ends
Mm-hmm.
or personal goals. You can't make any of those things meet cleanly, and they don't. Everything has always been a compromise. I will always point back to Empedocles, who stated that we exist in the tension of massive opposing forces that he labeled as love and strife. We exist in tension. Life, I mean, it's the samsara concept. We
Yeah.
are within that, we're in the struggle to escape samsara within Buddhist concepts, which I've been talking about with some of
Yeah.
my
I
good friends.
love those types of images from Empedocles and Samsara, and the pre-Socratics. I think I mentioned this is always my favorite that I have to bring up, Heraclitus or Heraclitus um, had a ton of different aphorisms that were in line with that way of thinking. Like the perfect harmony comes from the opposed from two different opposing notes. You can have two notes, and they create a harmony in the tension between those two notes, and that's where harmony comes from. Um,
I agree.
and I think I mentioned like the rams are fighting with each other and in their combat, in their contestation for resources and mates and food, they create their horns. Like nature creates this beautiful like spiral horn shape. The opposition of two conflicted tendencies, that's how nature creates the universe.
That's right. We've lost the ability to understand that the true debate is to the benefit of all who partake within it. I do believe that there is such a thing as productive competition, that we have lost this aspect of opposing one another to our mutual benefit, of people being in disagreement with each other allowed for an enriching
Mm,
experience of culture. And where I was going with stating this whole thing of people essentially getting lost in words, you pointed to the internet earlier. I argued the bloom of communication was too fast for us. We were unready for the consequences of what it would cause. When we talk about empty words, we are awash in a sea of empty words, where now words of meaning are just lost within this ocean of whatever, right? Anyways,
yeah. No,
but
but
back
I,
in
I agree. I think another aspect of that is not just empty words, but I think I mentioned this before, possibly, but I have a theory or I don't know if I've coined this term or this
oh
expression, but
god,
it's I call it trivializing by proximity. What that means is like I'm contrasting that with like pre internet, pre mass media, pre television. Um, in the olden days, you would have a not just a time but also a place for a significant event. So and again, we still have like for instance like you go to someone's funeral, okay, and it's this dignified, solemn affair, and you're buried in the ground, and you're put in a space with the other members of the community, and in that space, you don't have like a Starbucks, you don't have, um, you know, buy one get one free at McDonald's advertisements.
well,
It's
there's a
like
good thing,
it's a very walled off space for that kind of occasion.
right?
Um, and of course, there's still funerals today. But what I think trivializes by proximity is like that kind of idea of the online feed. You're getting this feed, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and everything is just crushed together where you have people announcing that their best friend died right next to someone asking you to visit their OnlyFans. And someone saying, "Hey, I'm taking a picture of my sandwich from this morning," and the brain kind of doesn't know how to process all these conflicted like stimulus, these like antithetical stimuli that are coming at them, and basically making all these different human experiences equivalent because they're placed right next to each other in the same size box or square on their feed. And I just think people, it kind of dumbs us down and makes us think, well, you know, my friend died and my mom's in the hospital and my friend's eating a sandwich and my, you know, and everything's kind of like mushed together as if there's, when we live so much online, I think it trivializes our lives to a certain extent just by everything being in the same proximity simultaneously.
I think that you have an excellent image of what the issue is in the. Oh God, do you remember the? This is off. This is kind of off the topic, but still on the topic. Do you remember the movie Johnny Mnemonic?
Oh, I never saw it.
Okay, so within that little short story by William Gibson, who was visionary, but really owes a lot to Werner Vinge in his book True Names, which I may have referenced at some point way earlier. Anyways, the really creative thing that he had within Johnny Mnemonic is people were suffering from something called the black shakes, and didn't know what was causing it. And literally, what was causing it was the mash of all the information being force fed into our brains, and it was literally killing people.
Wow.
And I mean, it's this one thing where these visionaries looked at the problems of society that they could see coming, right?
Yeah.
As progress moves forward, as this information becomes rammed into our heads, we are overloaded with an abundance of flatly irrelevant information. When I say irrelevant, it has no impact or meaning on our day-to-day lives.
Right. It's
So
just something,
whenever
it's like a train going by. It's like,
So when I've been asked this, and people call me callous and harsh, and I hope that when our talks present, that I'm not actually that callous of a person, nor am I harsh. I
no,
actually
no.
can't think of it. But it is one thing when people tell me, "Did you hear what happened to this actor?" The first things out of my mouth are, "I don't care." So
Right.
what is that? What impact does that have directly upon me in any way or any significance? I just don't care. So I want to give you a kind of a different kind of, I don't know what you call, maybe an allegory of sorts. Imagine cultures as puddles, right? In in a small like pond, you're going to see something that's, I mean, is it going to have great waves? No, but you know what is within it. There is no great wave that's going to overtake everything. It's all very stable in comparison. But it feels like the when you talk about the internet and the blossoming of communication capabilities, it's like the water level rose,
Mm.
taking those puddles and sweeping them into this grand ocean where everything was lost. And so what you have is this bizarre monoculture of language where all the language is the same, but the meaning that it once had within these small insular cells, which was greater, is now been swept away into this larger corpus that, and it feels no connection to it.
Right.
So what I find fascinating with that is that my father would often say this thing when he was talking about business. Whenever you had so many problems that you couldn't tack any of it down, there's so much that there isn't any.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So much communication occurring that there
Oh yeah,
isn't
yeah,
any.
yeah. Yeah.
It's so overwhelming that it is of no value.
I thought of the same thing just the other day or just yesterday. I was out doing errands, going to various shops and stuff. Everywhere we went, they were playing like modern, like classic rock music from the 80s and 90s. We went to like a California Pizza Kitchen for lunch, and they were playing like classic rock music from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, piping it through the sound system while we were eating. And
Mhm.
then we went to, um, where else did we go? We went to Vaughn's, right? And it was the same thing, piping the music. We went to Barnes and Noble, piping the music through the sound system. We went to all these kind of big box corporate stores doing our errands. And it was like, can't you guys give us a break? Is it just now the norm that we're always just being fed like music through the airwaves? Like you can't escape it. If you go to a bar, there's flat screen TVs or music loud. If you go to any like shopping or any kind of place where people commune socially, you're going to have like loud music being piped in. And I think they do it because like that's just the norm now. If they didn't do that, they would be like, people would complain and say, well, what's wrong? Is your sound system broken? But
Oh my
getting
God.
back to what you were saying, there's so much there that it doesn't exist. It's like there's so much music in the air that music doesn't exist anymore. It's like it's no longer a special experience because it's this ongoing background noise. And of
So
course, there's so much music now online. It's like it's just constant, and you have endless access to like a billion songs. Um, it's like music doesn't even exist anymore to a certain extent.
there is
It
a value.
trivializes by proximity. That's the term I used
That's
before.
actually, I like that because, well, if you're going to create new terminology, it should explain something clearly to the common person, and that
Mm.
really does a good job of what that is. This is why I like that you went into language, and I was very curious what drove you, and I'm kind of happy that we had this talk
Mm.
because language is truly the instrument that history lives through today, right now.
Yeah,
When you
yeah,
say the words you say, when you write the words you write,
yeah.
it is crackling with all of our history in one moment.